Now, one of the world's greatest enduring mysteries is a mystery no more. For decades, the Bermuda Triangle has captured imaginations with stories of vanishing planes and ships. But now, a new scientific theory claims to have finally answered this mystery.
An underwater drone reached the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, and what it filmed shocked the world. Not because it found what people expected. There were no clear answers, no obvious explanation. Just an eerie silence beneath one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Then came a deep-sea expedition. In 2001, a crew with no interest in the Bermuda Triangle's legends set out on what should have been a routine mission. Their objective was simple: lower an underwater drone to the ocean floor and search for long-lost shipwrecks. But as the drone descended nearly 700 meters into the darkness, the sonar detected something that brought the entire crew to a halt. When the cameras finally reached the seabed, they captured images that sparked endless debate. Massive stone-like formations, centuries-old shipwrecks scattered across the ocean floor, with human bones scattered among the wreckage, and discoveries that raised more questions than answers. But one thing is certain. What the drone captured left everyone asking the same question. What is really hiding at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle? Before we descend any deeper into the darkness, make sure to subscribe, because the truth hidden beneath these waters is far more terrifying than most people realize. Let's uncover the mystery hidden beneath the Bermuda Triangle. In 2001, Paulina Zalitsky's company, Advanced Digital Communications, had secured a contract with the Cuban government to scan the seabed for Spanish colonial shipwrecks, gold, silver, and sunken cargo. Standard treasure hunting work. Her team was experienced, her equipment was top of the line, and nobody on that vessel expected anything beyond weeks of routine scanning. But the ocean had other plans. The side-scan sonar system worked by firing sound pulses at the seafloor and reading what bounced back. Mud absorbs sound and shows up dark. Rock reflects it and shows up bright, but always in messy, uneven shapes. That is what millions of years of geological chaos looks like on a screen. You stare at it long enough, and you stop really seeing it. It becomes background noise, which is exactly why what happened next hit the crew so hard. Because something on that screen snapped everyone to attention. What Zalitsky's team saw broke every pattern they had ever recorded. Bright returns forming parallel lines, consistent spacing, and right angles. Not the random scatter of a collapsed reef or the debris trail of a sunken galleon. This was order. Clean, deliberate, unmistakable order, showing up in a place where order has no business existing. Her lead sonar technician, a marine engineer who had logged years reading ocean floor data across the Caribbean, ran the scan again from a different angle. The shapes held. He adjusted the instrument's gain and frequency settings, cycling through every calibration trick he knew. The shapes held. He pushed back from the console, turned to Zalitsky and told her the equipment was functioning perfectly. Whatever was producing this signal was real, solid, and sitting on the bottom. Here's the catch. The sonar also showed shadows behind the shapes. Now, that might sound like a small technical footnote, but to anyone who reads sonar for a living, it is enormous. Shadows only appear when an object rises above the surrounding surface. Flat ground cannot cast a shadow. Buried debris cannot cast a shadow. A thin layer of rock sitting flush with the seabed cannot cast a shadow. Whatever was down there had height, mass, and defined edges. It was standing on the seafloor the way a building stands on land. Zalitsky ordered the vessel to hold position. She had the team run 5 more passes over the area, approaching from different bearings each time, varying speed and scan depth. Every single pass returned the same result: 5 passes, 5 identical readings, and not one of them matched any known shipwreck signature, any coral formation pattern, or any geological structure in the entire regional database. The crew checked them all. Nothing even came close. Now, keep this in mind. Zalitsky was not a conspiracy theorist or an amateur chasing legends. She held advanced degrees in marine engineering. She had led deep-sea expeditions across the Caribbean for years. When she looked at that sonar data, she was not seeing what she wanted to see. She was seeing what the instruments were telling her was there. And the instruments were telling her something that, by every known standard of ocean geology, should have been impossible. The team marked the coordinates and made a decision that would change the entire direction of the mission. Forget the shipwrecks, forget the gold. They were going to send a camera to the bottom and see this thing with their own eyes. And if you were the kind of person who needs to know what they found down there, do me a favor. Hit subscribe right now, because this story is about to go somewhere nobody expected. 700 meters into darkness. Sending a remotely operated vehicle to 700 meters isn't something you do on a whim. You don't simply press a button and lower a camera into the sea. At that depth, the pressure exceeds 70 atmospheres, powerful enough to crush any submarine not specially built to survive it. Sunlight disappeared hundreds of meters above. The water is almost freezing, completely black, and utterly silent. One snapped cable, one broken seal, one electrical failure, and the machine is lost forever. It becomes another object resting on the ocean floor, never to be recovered. There is no rescue mission. There is no second opportunity. You either get it right, or you lose everything. Zalitsky's team prepared their ROV with the intense focus that comes from fully understanding what was at risk. They inspected the reinforced tow cable meter by meter. They tested the high-powered floodlights, the only source of visibility in a place untouched by natural light since the ocean first formed above it. They calibrated the cameras, verified the live video connection, and ran full diagnostics on every system twice. Only after every check passed did they carefully lower it into the water. The cable slowly unrolled. During the first 50 meters, faint natural light still filtered through the sea. Small fish drifted across the camera, completely unaware of the strange glowing visitor descending below. Then came the darkness, pressing against the camera lens like a solid wall. The ROV's floodlights became the only light left in existence. A narrow beam of artificial white stretching into an endless void. Tiny particles floated past the camera like slow-falling snow, disturbed by the vehicle moving through the water. The pressure readings kept climbing. 300 meters, 400 meters, 500 meters. The crew on the surface stared at the monitors in complete silence. No one spoke. No one even shifted in their seat. The only sounds inside the control room were the soft hum of electronics and the quiet clicks of the cable winch feeding more line into the depths. At 680 meters, something slowly appeared at the edge of the floodlights as the seafloor came into view. What showed up on the screen was nothing anyone expected. It wasn't mud. It wasn't scattered rocks. It wasn't the broken, uneven landscape they had seen on countless deep-water dives over the years. Large, flat surfaces filled the display. The ROV moved closer, and the shapes became clearer. Clean edges, perfectly straight edges, enormous rectangular blocks resting side by side with smooth faces and sharp corners that looked almost machine-made. Some stretched several meters across. Their surfaces looked untouched, not worn away, not buried beneath silt, not cracked or broken after thousands of years under pressure and powerful currents. At 700 meters deep, where sediment constantly falls from the water above and should bury everything beneath thick layers of mud, within only a few centuries, these blocks looked as though they had been placed there the day before. Zalitsky later described that moment during interviews. She said the control room fell completely silent. Not just quiet, completely silent. Her sonar technician sat frozen at his station, one hand still resting on the controls without moving. One crew member gripped the edge of the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. Another slowly stepped away from the monitor as though the image could somehow reach through the screen, because what they were seeing simply did not belong there. Not at that depth, not in that ocean, not anywhere within the known geological record. And every person in that room realized it at exactly the same moment. The evidence nobody could explain. Here's the truth. When the footage was examined frame by frame in the weeks that followed, the mystery didn't become smaller. It grew in every possible direction. The blocks weren't scattered at random. They were arranged in rows, with even spacing and repeating patterns stretching across a large section of the seafloor. Nature doesn't work that way. Ocean currents scatter debris unpredictably. Geological forces split and spread rocks without order. Volcanic activity creates rough, irregular landscapes. Throughout the history of ocean floor exploration, no one had documented natural formations showing this level of geometric precision at any depth. And here's the surprising part. The stone itself didn't match the surrounding geology. The seafloor off western Cuba is mostly limestone, a soft, porous rock formed from compressed marine life over millions of years. Limestone wears away easily. It cracks, erodes, and slowly dissolves under the relentless force of deep ocean currents. But the blocks captured by the ROV looked dense, solid, and remarkably smooth, with surfaces far more similar to granite or another igneous rock. Granite forms under intense heat deep inside the Earth's crust and is incredibly difficult to cut or shape, even using modern industrial equipment. Discovering what looked like granite blocks arranged in geometric rows on a limestone seabed was like finding a steel girder in the middle of a forest. It simply didn't belong. It couldn't have formed there naturally. Manuel Iturralde Vinent, one of Cuba's most respected geologists and a senior researcher at the National Museum of Natural History in Havana, personally reviewed the sonar data and ROV footage. His response was cautious but revealing. He confirmed the formations didn't match any known natural geological process in the region. The regularity of the structures, their apparent composition, and their remarkable state of preservation at that depth were, in his words, very unusual and worthy of serious further investigation. But he stopped short of declaring them man-made, and that hesitation spoke volumes. Because Iturralde Vinent wasn't suggesting the evidence supported a natural explanation. He was acknowledging that the alternative carried such enormous implications that no scientist wanted to be the first to publicly commit to it. Think about that for a moment. One of Cuba's leading geologists studied the evidence, admitted he couldn't explain it through natural processes, and essentially said, "I'm not prepared to say what this actually is." But here's where the mystery deepened even further. At 700 meters, loose sediment constantly drifts down from the water above. Tiny particles of organic material, silt, and microscopic debris fall like invisible snow, day after day, century after century. Over thousands of years, this slow process buries everything resting on the ocean floor beneath thick layers of mud. Shipwrecks only a few centuries old are often completely covered, invisible to cameras and detectable only through sonar. Yet many of these blocks remained fully exposed. Their edges stayed sharp. Their surfaces remained clean. That left only two possibilities, and neither one was easy to accept. Either the structures were much younger than their depth suggested, which made no geological sense considering how long land takes to sink 700 meters, or something about this particular section of the seafloor had prevented normal sediment from building up, which also lacked any convincing explanation within existing geological models. Every answer uncovered an even more difficult question, and no one, not Zalitsky, not Iturralde Vinent, not anyone who examined the data, had a single theory capable of explaining every piece of evidence at once. What the timeline demands. Now, this is where the story crosses a boundary that makes many people uncomfortable. Because if these structures were not created by any known natural process, then the only explanation left is that someone built them. And the depth where they rest forces a timeline that challenges everything mainstream archaeology accepts about human history. Land doesn't sink 700 meters in a few centuries. It doesn't even sink that far within a few thousand years. In this part of the Caribbean, that level of geological subsidence, where dry land drops beneath the ocean and continues sinking deeper over time, takes at least tens of thousands of years. Some geological models suggest even longer, depending on local tectonic activity and plate movement. That places the possible origin of these structures in an era when, according to every accepted archaeological framework, humans lived in small groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers. No cities, no stone quarries, no organized workforce, no construction technology of any kind, and no civilization remotely capable of carving massive stone blocks, transporting them, and arranging them into deliberate geometric patterns across such a large area. But here's the catch. The evidence on the seafloor doesn't care about the accepted historical record. It simply remains there, 700 meters beneath the surface, hidden in complete darkness, waiting for someone to explain it. Greg Little, an archaeologist and researcher who has investigated several underwater anomalies throughout the Caribbean basin, reviewed the available data from the Zalitsky expedition and publicly stated that the formations deserved serious, fully funded scientific investigation. He noted that the structure's size, regularity, and apparent composition were extremely difficult to explain through any known natural process. The formations could be man-made. Little paused before continuing. He said that if they truly were, it would require a complete rethinking of how old organized human civilization actually is. On the other side, skeptics presented alternative explanations, and to be fair, those views deserve consideration. Some pointed to a geological process called jointing, where volcanic or tectonic forces cause rock to fracture along remarkably regular planes, sometimes creating shapes that appear surprisingly geometric to the untrained eye, or even on sonar images. Robert Ballard, the legendary deep-sea explorer who discovered the wreck of the Titanic, has often explained that the ocean floor is filled with formations that seem artificial, but prove completely natural when examined closely. His consistent position has been that extraordinary claims about underwater structures require extraordinary physical evidence, solid evidence, including rock samples, isotopic dating, and geological core drilling, none of which have ever been collected from the Cuban site. And that is exactly the problem. Without another expedition, without physical samples, and without direct geological testing of those blocks, the site remains locked in permanent uncertainty. Not proven, not disproven, simply waiting. Now, there's one more theory worth exploring, and it's the boldest of them all, but also the one that seems to fit the physical evidence most closely. Some researchers have suggested that the Caribbean plate lies within one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. Massive tectonic events, including sudden vertical collapses of entire coastal shelves, have occurred throughout the region's deep geological past. If a catastrophic event, a megathrust earthquake, or a chain reaction along a plate boundary, caused an inhabited coastal landscape to plunge into the ocean within hours instead of over thousands of years, it could explain nearly everything. The remarkable preservation of the structures, the lack of heavy sediment buildup, and the surprisingly fresh-looking surfaces that should appear ancient. A rapid, violent submersion could have sealed the entire site like a time capsule, preserving it in the deep ocean's cold darkness before the slow processes of underwater erosion had the chance to take hold. It's speculative, it's dramatic, but it's not physically impossible. And compared with the other theories, it's the only one that doesn't force you to ignore half the evidence. The silence that followed. Here's what troubles me most about this entire story. It isn't what was discovered. It's what happened afterward. Absolutely nothing. Zalitsky tried repeatedly to organize another expedition. She contacted universities, research foundations, oceanographic institutions, anyone with the funding and equipment needed for a proper deep-sea investigation. She had the exact coordinates. She had the sonar data. She had the ROV footage. She had a site documented by professional equipment during a licensed commercial operation. This wasn't an amateur sighting or a second-hand rumor. It was real data, carefully recorded and archived, ready for further study. The response was mostly silence. The Cuban government, facing its own political and economic challenges, didn't make the site a priority. No major American or European university stepped forward with funding. No oceanographic institution committed the ship time, equipment, or research team needed to return. One of the most intriguing underwater anomalies discovered in the Caribbean in decades was documented, catalogued, filed away, and then quietly left behind. Zalitsky spent years pushing for another expedition. She gave interviews, she shared the evidence publicly. Time and again, she argued that the site deserved proper scientific investigation. And every time, the response was nearly identical. Interesting. Important. Unfortunately, there isn't enough funding right now. Think about that. We live in an age where billionaires finance expeditions to the Titanic for tourism, where governments invest billions exploring distant planets with robotic spacecraft. Yet a documented underwater anomaly resting less than a kilometer beneath the surface of an ocean humans have crossed for more than 500 years can't secure funding for a single return mission. The sonar data still exists. The ROV footage is genuine. The coordinates are known, and the site remains untouched, 700 meters beneath one of the most mysterious and legendary stretches of ocean on Earth, hidden in permanent darkness, with no one going back. And here's the remarkable part. We've sent rovers to Mars. We've photographed black holes billions of light years away. We've mapped the moon's surface down to the smallest details. Yet, these structures, resting in our own ocean, remain almost completely unexplored. That silence speaks louder than any theory ever could. Whether those blocks were shaped by geological forces we don't yet understand, or placed there by hands, history has completely forgotten. One truth remains. The ocean never gives up its secrets easily. And this one is still buried beneath 700 meters of crushing darkness, waiting for someone determined enough, or brave enough, to finally return and uncover the truth. So, what do you think? Are these formations the work of geology, or could they be evidence of a forgotten chapter in human history? Share your thoughts in the comments because I'd genuinely love to hear them. And if this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have many more stories like this coming soon. And believe me, they only become more mysterious from here. Until next time.